Thank you, Patrick. It's my pleasure to introduce today's presenters. SHIFT is a women of color, racial and gender equity education and consulting group. Established in 2017 in the height of the Me Too movement. Its founders were deeply craving a space for their own communities to engage in honest dialogue and community accountability. And as women of color, survivors, and educators themselves, it was imperative to center and elevate the work from people in Black, Indigenous, and people of color, LGBTQIA+, and disabled communities. So just a little bit about each member of SHIFT who is here with us today. We have Natalie Bowie. She's a second generation Vietnamese American and comes to SHIFT with a background in policy and organizing. She's previously worked on voter education at Planned Parenthood, immigrant rights at ACLU of San Diego, and policy advocacy at Asian Americans Advancing Justice, Los Angeles. She's also an illustrator and cares deeply about centering the narratives, identities, and politics of communities of color. Thank you, Natalie, so much for being here with us today. Our next member of SHIFT is Feline Mahato. She is a second generation Chicana whose work is informed by anti-racist organizing, reproductive justice, and art making for social change. Previously, she served as the Director of Equity, Safety, and Inclusion for Everyone, a Golden Voice initiative to prevent and stop any form of harassment at Coachella and Stagecoach music festivals, and was a lecturer in the Department of World Arts and Culture and Dance at UCLA, where she also served as Director of Community Programs for the UCLA Art and Global Health Center. Thank you so much, Feline, for being here. So without further ado, SHIFT.
Thank you so much, Lori. Hello, everyone. Happy Women's Herstory Month. We're so excited to be in community with you, to have this hour together and to share a little bit more about ourselves and our experiences and our lessons and our continuous lessons that we are continuously in practice with daily in our work. But again, to share, my name is Feline. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm the CEO of SHIFT, and I'll pass it to Natalie.
And hi all, again, Natalie, COO of SHIFT, and I'm so excited to be here today. And again, to share the lessons learned that we're still very much navigating in real time. So with that, Feline, does it feel okay for me to share my screen?
Yeah, be great.
Great, give me just a moment. All right, y'all, y'all should be able to see this now.
Beautiful, thanks, Nat.
Yeah.
So, as you all already kind of heard our story a bit, I kind of wanted to just elaborate a little bit on it. I think we both want to share a little bit of how we came into the work at SHIFT, but I guess to share, our work is very meta. We are a gender and racial equity consulting group. We are also women and femmes, women of color, right, in this world. So it is a part of our business, and we are also actively navigating it. So we're constantly finding ourselves kind of in and out of the work. Like the work is very personal, and it also is our daily job. And so I start off by sharing that to kind of share the birth a little bit more of SHIFT and in the Me Too movement, where there was the beginnings, I think, of this like social consciousness reckoning that we were starting as a culture. We were starting to kind of confront the ways that systems of harm continue to perpetuate themselves. And for all of us, I think in different ways, and we'll speak to our personal experience, it was a call to action. It was a call to action of like, all right, like our experiences are out in public, and who better to lead them than the folks that feel empowered to do so and that have the lived experience to do so. I think when we first came into the field, we wanted to immediately address kind of sexual harassment prevention, but the three of us could not do that without addressing the intersectional identities that impact that conversation, meaning race, meaning ability, meaning sexual orientation, class, all of the things that intersect with that. And so it was really important for us to make sure that that conversation was integrated. And so we came into the work, and here we are in 2022, almost 5 years later. We just realized we're about to celebrate our 5-year anniversary. And it's been quite a ride. It's been quite a ride. So we want to share more about that with you. But I guess I'll just share personally in my own journey. As you heard, I'm a second gen Chicana Latinx woman. And I think I come from like an upbringing, specifically with my mother, who was a part of the Chicano movement here in Los Angeles in the 70s, with an awareness around race, with an awareness around systems of power. And that framework shaped the way I moved through the world from a very young age. And I think when I got to a point where I started to understand it for myself and have my own experiences in that, it became really clear that this work was important to me and it was a part of my passions, whether it was art making or education or any kind of other thing I wanted to explore. The intersection of like social justice work and activism always was there for me. And so I came into the work and here we are today, and I am working with some of my best friends. And so I'll pass it to one of them to share about her journey.
Thanks, Feline. Thanks for that. Thank you for that intro. And again, want to share a little bit more about myself too, more on top of what you've already heard at the top. But yes, my name's Natalie. I'm Vietnamese American, and I'm kind of reflecting on how everything that's been happening with Stop Asian Hate has really made this work louder for me. It's also made me so tired, and it's also made me recognize how important it is, but it also made me reflect on how much I came into this role to very much challenge the model minority myth, the ways I've internalized my own racism, all of it. And to step into not just racial and gender equity work, but to be building a business, to try to learn how to operate building a business in these systems. Oh my God, that's been like a whole journey. And so as much as like Feline and I have named the top of our work is like unpacking these cycles of oppression and building like cycles of what I heard from Feline yesterday, cycles of liberation, tools for empowerment, tools to uplift our communities and spaces that we want to see. We've also learned just some real stuff along the way about owning a business, starting a business, navigating the client world, the world outside of us, and trying to make money and feed ourselves, but also prioritizing people over profits. It's a whole journey. And I'm so excited to share a little bit more about what we feel like we're navigating in real time. And we hope that these considerations are things that you all find useful in whatever endeavor you choose to do. Because I think naturally, as women of color, we are so entrepreneurial already. We know how to hustle. We know how to make that money. We are so creative. So I hope that what we share with you today will translate into how you show up in your communities, in your schools, in your family, in your friends, and whatever amazing, dope stuff you all will do after you leave your community, after you leave your communities in your college or in your school studentship, because we're still in that studentship too. Mm-hmm. So with that, Feline, anything you want to add before I jump in?
No, let's do it.
Okay, so one of the first things we realized as we started this business was something that we're still learning, that don't get caught up in the clout. And when we mean the clout, we mean the clout of like big names that are working with us, big partnerships that we've signed, big clients that we've booked. We learned that they are never as important or as big as you make them out to be. That honestly, value alignment is more important than the clout of the brand or company. Mm-hmm. And we get caught up. We still get caught up in like, oh my God, we just signed this really big client. Oh my God, we got hit up by this big client to do work. And that name recognition is so buzzy. But then we realize like, dang, they still have their own systems that they're dealing with, their own systems of harm that they're navigating through. And that's why they're calling us. And so it was a reminder of reminding us like, okay, we actually get the most joy when we work with organizations and communities that speak the same language that we do, that see our value and our worth and want to uplift other communities like us. And there's like no replacing that in when it comes to name recognition. So just a note to self, so like don't get caught up in the clout, because they don't really mean anything at the end of the day. You want to add anything to that, Feline?
Yeah, I think for this one, it's like about like the ways that we as in Shift, and I imagine, some of us like pedestalize things, right? Like we think things are out of reach, or we think people or brands or names are kind of so much like above. We create this hierarchy, right? Because I think the systems of capitalism and white supremacy create this hierarchy. That power dynamic is intentional. But I think we realize as we get deeper and deeper into these institutions and the veils get pulled back more and more, we realize exactly what Nat said. It's so much more about value alignment. We are not here to convince anyone that our work is important. We are here to work with people that already believe our work is important, and then we can journey on together. And so just like specifically how that shows up with us, and as Nat said, all of these are work in progress, and that it's even empowering for us to like write it down on the slide for you and speak it to you, because it's a reminder for us that this is actually how we want to move with integrity in our work, as we're also in studentship.
Absolutely. That one, it's so easy to get caught up in the buzziness, the name, the flashiness. It's so easy to share and get that applause. Like at the end of the day, the value alignment is where it really matters.
Mm-hmm. It's most likely white supremacy, not you. So we're not doing a training today about the system of white supremacy. But for those of you that, have kind of an understanding of the way the system of white supremacy works, it is a constant culture that I think everyone working, I'll speak just in the US context, is interacting with on a daily basis. And I think as women of color, it's so easy for us to feel like we are not worthy or worth our full worth sometimes in these spaces, whether it's academic spaces, institutional spaces, business spaces, whatever it is, these feelings of like, am I good enough to be here? And the language that we can get to that is like imposter syndrome, feeling like you are a fraud in the space. And this is on the daily, y'all, that we deal with this.
Oh yeah.
So feelings of inadequacy are usually derived from systems of oppression working exactly as designed. Imposter syndrome is a result of this. But remember, the way these systems work. Keep zooming out and trusting yourself. And even if you don't like have all the language to like name the systems and whatnot, in your gut, right? Like I think trusting your body and your spirit to communicate to you and making space to listen to that of like, in your gut when something's not feeling right, when you feel like you're compartmentalizing parts of yourself in order to perform in this, space or whatever that is. And so even if like you don't have all the language to be like, that's white supremacy, that's the patriarchy, that's ableism, whatever it is that's happening in the space in the room in that moment, like I think we've gotten more deep in the practice of listening to what's happening in our bodies and in our feelings and our emotions that'll help inform us, okay, am I flawed, or is the system and the conditions that are being created flawed? And that question is such a constant that like I think is important for us to go back to, because these systems were not set up necessarily for people that look like me and Natalie and many of us on this call today to thrive in. And so us even trying to exist in them is a radical act. So, and it will continue to try to convince us that we might not be worthy of that space, but we know we are. Nat, did you want to add anything?
No, I'm just sitting with everything what you're saying. I think I just want to reiterate that whatever room you walk into, whatever space you come into and you feel really different, that's a reminder of the superpower, but that also gets really lost so easily because the rooms that we walk into have been conditioned and shaped to look a certain way for so long. Mm-hmm. So when we come in with a different idea, a different practice, a different way of being, sometimes it feels like backlash, like,
am I the problem?
Yeah, am I the wrong thing? But when in reality, it's like, y'all have been the same for so long and have not questioned these conditions, have not questioned these practices, that it's made me feel not worthy enough when it should be the other way around. Mm-hmm. And that is something, it's such a loaded thing. And it's something we work through every day. And we try to call ourselves in reminder of like, okay, we get to we hope that as entrepreneurs, as people wanting to step into an entrepreneurial shape, that we get to build those conditions and shape those conditions. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But reframing what these new places can, what these new conditions can look like, so we can thrive in them and not feel like we have to constantly just survive and keep up.
Or apologize, I'll add. I don't want to talk about this, or apologize for, feel like any sort of shame or apology for who we are and the ancestry and the culture and the languages and everything that we bring and show up in the room when we walk into those rooms.
Which I think leads us perfectly to our next point about cut the respectability politics and code switching. Show up as you. You will build deeper and more authentic relationships with individuals and organizations that will understand you and your process more. So taking a step back, when we name respectability in politics and code switching really quickly, it's thinking about the ways we define respectability and professionality, by the way we dress, by our hair, by how our accents, by how we come off. And it begs the question on who got to define that? Who got to define what is deemed respectable and professional and worthy, right? And the code switching is something, it's like, it's navigating how you show up in different spaces. I'll be real. Like if I'm up in the Bay, that's where I'm originally from, I talk really differently in how I show up with my friends. But I also recognize I don't do that. I code switch. I change the way I come up when I might be speaking to a client, because I'm trying to get that business. I'm trying to get that money and get that hustle, right? But I'm also recognizing this one sometimes exists in conflict. We see the value when we can show up in honesty in our fullest selves. And there are some folks that really gravitate towards that. And those are your people, and those are your community, and those are the ones you want to build with. But I think a good gut check is when I find that I have to like filter myself a little bit and feel like I have to look more refined or polished. That's always kind of a gut check on like, okay, what is it about this place and this system that's making me act in this way? And I want to name that we don't cut this all the time. Like we recognize that we do have to do this and negotiate how we show up in certain spaces. I think all in the name of recognizing, okay, is there opportunity for so much more expansiveness in this space if we invest in it? So this one's a hard one. But we just recognize the value of like, when we show up as our full selves, it invites other people to show up as their full selves, and it brings the most beautiful partnerships and who we are so happy and grateful to collaborate with.
Yeah, I think I just want to add that. I think respectability politics and code switching, I appreciate you saying like, this isn't something we like. I think what I'll say is that like respectability politics and code switching have been tools of survival.
Yes.
For communities of color specifically, but all marginalized communities, of like, how do we exist in these spaces and not feel completely like isolated or feeling like we were talking about before, right? Imposter syndrome. So I understand it's a tool that Nat and I, like she just said, we use it all the time. But I think it's like having an awareness that is a tool of white supremacy. So when we're talking about like who made what is respectable, who made what is professional, like all of that comes back to the ways that systems of white supremacy are working. But it's about having an awareness and a choice around it, right? Like I want to choose to show up in a way that is my full authentic self in this meeting. And I think that that's going to benefit me more in any other way, and also feels good in my body. Sometimes, as Nat was saying, we get on a call with a client and we know we have to like perform professionalism in the ways that we know that will help them understand like the power of the work that we can do. And that's like a strategy, right? Like on the real, that's our strategy. And that's the way we've had to navigate the world. And whether you were doing this consciously or subconsciously, like that is a skill set that never gets really valued for community of color, of knowing how to navigate predominantly white institutions in a way that allows us to continue to thrive or have any sort of success. But it is weighted. It's weighted. It's not super clean and cut. None of these.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Feline.
Celebrate the small wins. Ooh, yes, you got that seat at the table. But remember to celebrate the wins you get along the way. and know your own value and worth. So this is us talking about process, like being really present to process, not just the goal, not just the like, I got that contract, we met our financial goal, whatever that is. That's important too, right? That you're able to like say something and then do it, but also like all the messy learnings and wins and things that happen in the in between need to be valued just as much, right? Like how can we measure success in different ways, not in just like material ways, not in just capital ways, but how can we celebrate success in the ways that, I don't know, I'll just transparently with Shift, like the ways that we're communicating with each other. Like, can we be, I want to celebrate that we are able to communicate with each other in deeper, more authentic ways than we were several years ago, right? Like, how can we celebrate that process, whatever that is, however that translates for you?
Yeah.
And then knowing your own value and worth, I feel like is also, again, these systems of oppression and harm that exist and are always working in our world will like keep us kind of tunnel vision, right? Keep us tunnel vision to this goal that constantly seems like there's more. And so how can we like open up and be like and honor the journey and honor how much we've grown or put in work in or expanded in ways that we never even thought were possible to expand. Yeah, I'll say that much. Nat, do you want to add?
Yeah, hearing you speak about that, Feline, just makes me think so much of how much we have been conditioned to hustle, how much I think especially women of color have been conditioned to hustle and to make that money and to take on that extra labor and to take that gig, to take that work. And you lose sight of why you really joined the work. You lose sight on like why this was so important to you when we're all just caught up in trying to move on and get the next big thing. And so just sitting with like knowing when it's time to pause, but also knowing when it's time to like, okay, I did good. I did good this time. And like appreciate yourself in that way. And I feel like, yeah, I feel like that's hard to do. And I've personally been struggling with that, but it's so important to pause and just remember like, okay, like we've made it, we're good. Can we pause? Can I thank myself before we get back into that hustle mode? Yeah, that's what I'm sitting with. You want to add anything else to that, Feline, before we move on?
No.
This one is really big, so big, y'all. I think this applies in so many different areas that do not overcompensate or be too accommodating. Know your boundaries. Another thing I'm very present to as a business owner, as we step into racial and gender equity work, I'm very conscious of the ways women have been conditioned to be people pleasers, to always provide, to be the ones to pick up the emotional labor in the room. Oh my God, that's exhausting and that's tiring. That's another skill set that does not get valued or we don't list on resumes and things of that nature. And it all goes back to the connection of like, I feel like also women also are more likely to feel imposter syndrome. And so this is where we feel the need to overcompensate, or if a client or if someone is asking us to step in and do more work, we like need to feel like we need to prove ourselves. So we overdo the work. But now it's recognizing, I think it's a journey of recognizing what value you inherently bring, like Feline said, by existing in these institutions. There's lived experiences that bring that knowledge that no one else can. And so how do we also just protect our time and protect our energy? Because I think so much is expected of us to achieve and be boss women all the time. Yeah. So I'm just sitting with like the expectations of us to over deliver, but also to be like mothers in the room all the time, you know? And so sitting with knowing when is that coming up? When are we over accommodating? And when do we need to draw those boundaries?
Yeah. This is making me think of, I was watching a TikTok yesterday, y'all. And I don't know if folks have seen that trend of like, share a feminist power move that you do in spaces that make people uncomfortable. And
Ooh.
then people like cut into their own video and like share what they do. And the one I saw yesterday, I started laughing and was thinking about this conversation today, where this woman said, women are expected to show up in spaces and hold a lot of emotional labor in the room, and will do so by active listening. And so there's a lot of like emotive ways that we show that we're listening, right? Raised eyebrows, like, you know, furled eyebrows, you know, like just expressing like, yes, I'm listening to you. Yes, you're probably seeing me do it right now as I'm listening to Nat, but also because I love her and I feel what she's saying. But she was naming that like we will do that like by default sometimes. And she said her power move, which I just thought was funny. I don't think it's anything I'd ever do because that doesn't feel authentic to myself, was that when someone's talking to her and trying to like, well, maybe, yeah, anyways, but yeah, when someone's talking to her and trying to like share information, or like try to like exert any sort of like power above her, that she will just stop emoting and just stare directly into that person's face and
Oh,
not move,
wow.
not give any verbal cues, not move her eyebrows. And she did it like for 10 seconds looking at the TikTok video, and I was dying laughing. It made me so uncomfortable. I was like, you are so right. And I was thinking about that in situations that we've been in with clients where like, particularly, it is generally always white, cis, het men that are speaking to us in ways that are really like reinforcing a power dynamic, that are making it seem like we don't know what we're doing, that are belittling.
Mhm.
And it made me think of those moments and how can I, without having to like name it explicitly, just even show up energetically of like, I'm not willing to accept this. You can
Mhm.
keep living your life in the harmful ways you want to, unless you're paying me to support you to work through that. I'm not going to actually engage energetically, verbally, emotionally in this. And you might have an expectation of me to do this, but I will not. And it's
Yeah,
so small. It's so small, but
it's so small,
it's
but
profound.
it's boss, it's powerful. That's intense. But like we normally wouldn't think that's intense if a man were to do that,
Yep.
you know? So I'm sitting with that as well.
Yeah. Because I think when we're talking about this, it's an acknowledgement also that we are racialized and
Yes.
gendered to perform in these ways, that like all the things that Nat are saying. And so like some of this, and this is again about white supremacy, like talking about systems of oppression that shape us, right? Like, is this my truth? Or am I falling into, which is fair, we all do it, right? But like, am I performing in ways that are being expected of me based on like my identifiers?
Yeah. I'm also sitting with like the reality. I know that's the elements of our strength, and that's what also makes us so unique, that it is so rare to work in an environment where people will listen to feelings and emotions and lead with heart and truth and be so compassionate. So it's not a note to like do away with all of that, but it's just to recognize when it's showing up and it's not serving you in that moment. And in the spaces where it needs to be, the energy needs to be shifted in a different way. Because I love that that's also the part of shift strength as well. But just recognizing when it happens, and yes, not speaking true to what your gut is telling you.
Because it's our power. So you decide who gets to be a part of that.
Right? Totally. And I think this is also another beautiful segue into building systems of care into your work. Feline, can you take us away with that one?
Yes, exhale.
Yeah.
Speakers talk a lot about systems of oppression, right? And so in the ways that we understand that as shift is talking about how we can disrupt that through systems of care, exactly as Nat was saying. It's not about like devaluing maybe that innate part of ourselves, or that part of ourselves that are taught through our culture or through our genders. It's not about doing away with that. It's actually about just recognizing how powerful that is and how beautiful that is in disrupting these systems that we know cause harm. We feel it in our bodies every day. And so between like our shift team, I think this is a constant, because these systems are always working, it's a constant like checking each other, like asking each other, like, what do we need? How can we support each other? And that looks like so many different things that we'll touch on, I think, in the next slide as well. But it looks like some of the things we already named as well, right? Like knowing your boundaries, being able to be vulnerable and communicate what your needs are to the people that are that'll receive that and hold that for you. And then like on a real level, like building like policies and protocols and structures that are centering care, that are centering how are we going to prevent people from burning out? How are we going to make sure people are feeling good about what they're doing, right? How are we going to structure our budgets to make sure that we are cushioning space for that time off, or that time that people need to be with their families when a crisis comes up, or whatever that is. There's so many ways that we can talk about this, but it's about what Nat said at the top, like this idea that white supremacy and quite frankly capitalism puts of people over profits, or excuse me, profits over people, and flipping that of like putting people over profits. And how we do that is through care, and that's the way our framework kind of moves in that.
And maybe to give a little example of what that can look like too.
Yeah.
It also means prioritizing people over the work. Sometimes we like move through the work because that's just what we do. We got stuff to do. We got things to complete. But maybe it's taking that moment and being all like, is it right to move through that today? Like, do we need pause and reflection on, like, are you feeling okay to navigate through all of that? And so it's also just recognizing when the work can hold, the work will still get done at the end of the day, but like, are you taking care of the people around you, and are you present to how they might be feeling with everything going on? So it's even in the small ways that we feel like you can build that type of care and look out for one another, but very much so in the ways that you can build that into the policies and practices and structures too. And Feline, does it feel okay to move on to the next one?
Yeah.
This one feels really important as well. It's about being honest. As women of color, we're conditioned to present kindness in a specific way. So know that clarity, directness, and your truth is also kindness. I'm learning this in so many different ways. And I think it applies to how we show up with our family, in our friends, in our work relationships, in how we manage people, in how we want to support our managers. I remember reading that clarity is kindness and that lack of clarity is unkind. And when we think about the lack of clarity, when we are ambiguous in how we're feeling, when we aren't direct in what clear steps need to be taken or what actions need to come from it, that ambiguity leaves this lack of clarity on how folks don't know how to proceed. And it doesn't give them an informed decision on how they should be feeling or how they should be moving in this space. And so this one feels like a practice for us in a deep way about, okay, we need to get clear, we need to be direct, and we need to be honest, and beating around the bush just because like we're worried about hurting people's feelings is actually just delaying that process even more. And so this one feels, again, it does feel like a very gendered comment to, or acknowledgement of just recognizing the ways that we can, I'll speak for myself. I know that I tend to meander or beat around the bush when I really have something direct to say, and like, we should say it because it'll do everyone a service in the room when everyone is clear on how I'm feeling. Yeah.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah. Anything you want to add to that?
I think for this one, it reminds me of a value that we have in Shift in our work that we share in like workshops when we're talking about, you know, our gender and racial equity, is that we will say, strive for integrity, not perfection. You know, this one reminds me of that because it's not about like having the perfect words or showing up in the perfect ways. It's about just moving within the integrity. Like, are you being honest? And sometimes it's messy and it's not clear and it's not like coming out in the best ways, and that's okay. Like, but can you move with integrity and knowing that like you spoke your truth and that you trust that truth is in the room. And that takes so much work because, as Nat was saying, like for many reasons, right, we are conditioned to avoid that to some degree. And so, yeah.
The other thing I want to add, and in the inverse, it's like also being real about what you don't know. And I think a lot of us pretend to front that we know more than we do because we don't want to come off a certain way. But in reality, it just serves the people better when when we're real about, I don't know, what is that policy? If you know the policy isn't going to serve this individual in that way, can we just name that instead of it being ambiguous? So like, yeah, we'll figure it out. We'll move through it. We'll talk it through. Like, I'm just sitting with, let's admit when we don't know and when something is what it is, and let's just say it is what it is as well. So sitting with that too. Oh, and I think the final thing that we would love to share with you all is building your own table. What does that mean?
So we started Shift. We started Shift in 2017. We created our own workplace, our own community, our own income. That is our table. That is our table. Shift serves as so much for us as individuals, so much more than a job. You know, it's friendships, it's like kinship, it's community, it's the ways that we can practice the values that we're teach people about all the time in real time in our actual business in the daily. And it's a huge responsibility. I think building your own table is an incredible way to like carve out your lane, and it's like a huge responsibility in that like you are responsible, as Nat was sharing before, like of shaping the systems, of shaping the policies, of shaping potentially someone's work schedule. You know, like it really is a huge responsibility in the best ways. I think it's a beautiful opportunity to really like disrupt these systems that we've all been navigating and create the work environments where people feel like they're cared for and that they're seen and that they're heard. So you get to make the decisions. You get to make the rules. You make the timelines. There's so much power to create new ways of being and work outside this white, cis, hetero, homogenous way of being that we have been naming. And I'm sure many of you have experiences of interacting with in many different ways, right? So we share this of like, even in the small ways that you can build your own table. Like maybe it is a business one day, I don't know, but maybe it's just how are you creating an accountability group around self-care between you and your friends? I don't know what it is, but what does that table look like for you in your passions, in your needs, in your respective spaces and places, because they matter. It matters the ways that we organize with each other. Because if we're all doing it, then we're all moving towards a goal of disrupting these systems that cause so much harm.
Oh, thank you, Feline, for naming that. Hearing you also say that makes me also want to name how we're also not immune to recreating harmful work patterns. It's the default of our society. Yep. So it's very easy to fall into those patterns. So there's so much responsibility in just, yes, making the decisions, being in that power, making that timeline, but like recognizing when are we falling into these habits that I remember I didn't like ever being in that previous work setting that I was in. So I think that comes with a lot of responsibility in recognizing like, how do we not repeat and recreate the systems of harm that we are so trying to call out and name and dismantle right now? And we're not going to get it right. And we also don't know what that clearly looks like. So it's so scary to have one foot in and one foot out, but it's very much, there's so much power and magic in the reimagining and the envisioning of what this space can look like. And it's so scary because there's no roadmap for it, but it's quite powerful and a magical place to be in when you recognize you're holding those two spheres. And so sitting with the weight of that responsibility, but it's a lot, but it's like, whew, like, yeah, stepping into power in those ways as well. Yeah, and so with that, you all, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. We just want to thank you all for being here today with us. Doing this today was very much medicine in the ways that I think, I'll speak for myself, Feline, but I think like I've been needing it to name and revisit these values and what we've learned along the way, because sometimes we get caught in the thick of it in these systems and operating in these systems. And so it's nice to sit with like what we are trying to unpack and name. And I just hope that whoever's in this room, I just hope we see more women of color entrepreneurs. We need you all out there. We need you all to build those tables, to build those systems, to uplift your people and your community in whatever spaces you bring it to. And also just recognizing even that you existing in these spaces is so powerful too. So we're just so excited to see what y'all do next. And we hope that some of these words stay with you as you all build whatever I know is the dope stuff that you all will do next. Yeah, that's all I got. Feline, you want to add anything else?
No, I think we have a couple of minutes for some Q&A. So we are here to share any additional thoughts, hold space, take any questions.
We'll be around.
Thank you both for that. That was amazing. And I got a lot of takeaways from that. So I really appreciate that. And I'm sure that many of the people listening did as well. We do have some time for some questions. So I just want to remind everybody that if you do have a question, go ahead and put that in the chat. You can send it to either Patrick or Elizabeth, and they will go ahead and send that to us so we can ask those. But I do have a couple for you to start off with, if that's okay. First off, what has been the most rewarding part of founding Shift?
Oh, wow. Oof.
Man, there's so many. I'm trying to think of like the most.
There is a lot. One that feels really rewarding is the team that we're building. And they get to see different ways of working and different ways of being and existing in the workplace. And it feels affirming when they recognize like, oh, it can happen. And it can happen in small ways, and they can see it happen through Shift, which means that it can happen anywhere, right? So that feels really rewarding to build a team, and but also seeing them see the fruits of like, okay, things can be different.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think how we work as a team internally, in addition to like we are able to create and kind of be in workshop with the work we want to see in a micro level with our business. That has been incredible and profoundly like humbling too. I think I feel really present to right now. Like, I think the things that are most rewarding is like when we recognize that we fumbled or that we recreated a system of harm or that we fell into white supremacy culture or putting profits over people or all the things that we do. We can actually call each other into it and have a conversation and sit with the discomfort of being able to like, yeah, that happened because we know those systems are always working. So now what are we going to do differently? I think I feel really proud of that right now because I feel like 5 years in and we're really like getting stronger and having those conversations and accountability, which is so crucial with integrity. And so right now, I would say that is my one of my favorite parts, or I forget how you posed the question.
Rewarding, but yeah, you got it.
That's good.
But I echo that completely, Feline. Feel that deeply and definitely feel that towards you.
Oh,
yeah.
Loving that. We're also really good friends. And
that and that came from having some of the most difficult, hardest conversations I've never been conditioned to have in any other space, but I've had to have them with Feline. So it's like such a unique relationship and raw that we don't get to experience often because we're not really taught to have these conversations in other ways.
I love how the both of you interact with each other, and that it's so uplifting to see, you know, the support that you give to each other. I think that's also a lesson for a lot of us as well. So thank you for that. But one more question. What are some important systems of care that you have found to help you?
Yes. Oh my gosh.
I can share a small one.
Yeah.
That I feel like I call on a lot. It feels so simple, but something so easy to forget is breathing. Just like breathing. I feel like when we have a tense conversation and just like, I've started to do this thing in trainings and in like internal meetings too, where I like have started to just say exhale, like after I've gone on for like a 5-minute lecture about whatever, I'll sometimes just say exhale. And that's a reminder to myself, but I've noticed when I like look on the screen too, people do it with me. And I'm like, okay, like maybe sometimes what I need is what the room needs too. And like just being present to like my personal needs as I'm doing my work. I've realized it sometimes creates care for others. So that's like a really micro way that it showed up recently.
It's a good one though.
Oh, breathing. There's probably some other people that need to breathe in the room too.
I think about how you shared how KCRW started doing that as just a DJ radio station, started adding breathing and meditation to their music. Was like radical in that way. Yeah. I can think of two things. One, this comes from me managing. We hired our first full-time staff member, which is a really big and exciting deal. But she came up with the practice of doing a feedback loop every week. So it is, we name from both, what did that person do well to support us? What could they improve on to support us? And then she also created a feedback loop of like, what did I do well? And where could I have supported her better? So it's like a self-reflection for myself and a self-reflection for her, but we do that every week. So we are practicing honesty, and we do not let things fall through the crack, and we do not let things bubble and fester up. So it's like a practice of accountability. That one feels really clear to me. There was another one. Oh, I think I'm still sitting in awe with this. We are a part of a really big initiative that will take place at Golden Boys and designing safety and inclusion at the festivals. But Feline really had this great idea of designing a whole position to support the care of the leadership team members. And that position is solely created to make sure the leadership team at the festival days they're taking water breaks, they're resting, they have food. It's literally a position designed to support the well-being and the care of the leadership staff when everything is so intense and so emotionally and physically taxing. And to me, that felt like, wow, okay, we can create whole roles around this and be so specific to support the well-being of the people. So that to me felt like an infrastructure development that folks could implement too. But yeah, those are those things that I'll name.
Perfect, thank you. And this somewhat runs along similar lines, but what, if any, is the value of women supporting each other in the workplace?
Everything.
Everything.
Oh man.
I don't even know where to begin. I just think, honestly, when I step into a new meeting and I'm pitching a new service, I'm pitching a new client, a new project, if there's another woman in the room, I feel like they'll see me. And they don't even have to do much, just their presence there. Like, I feel like they'll see me and they'll see my journey and they'll recognize like what that labor will take. And so, honestly, just going back to like just existing in these spaces literally sometimes is enough to know that like, okay, there's other people with these experiences like this with me, and I can do this.
I think from like what you're naming, Nat, like from engaging a client standpoint, I think from our end, it's a huge indicator. Are there women of color in this call, in this room? It's a huge indicator to us of how we feel about the client, and if we kind of want to work with them in the meeting. Did that woman or that woman of color speak? I've noticed that if there's only one woman or woman of color in the space and they haven't spoken the entire time I'm taking an intake call, I'll be intentional and be like, so and so, did you want to add anything to what you said? And so I think seeing each other, and also like for us, I think as a business, like it reads to us that there is possibility for growth, possibility for us to do the work, possibility for us to support that maybe one person of color or one woman in the space in any way. So that's like externally. And I think internally, we've already kind of named this, like I said, like anything hard I go through personally in my work, Nat knows about pretty intimately. Like it's always a phone call or a Slack message or like check in, how are you feeling? And like truly each other's support systems.
Yeah.
More than a colleague, and like we're sisters, wifey, you know?
Yeah, all of it. And it's so necessary for the survival and thriving in this space.
Mhm.
Just on the flip side, so you seem to have a really great friendship and relationship with each other. What about, if you don't get along, how do you support that other person or that other woman if you don't get along with them?
Oh,
Yeah. I don't know if I can even answer like not getting along as much as like when there's moments of conflict.
yeah, because that happens too all the time.
Yeah, conflict happens all the time. Not getting along, that's so interesting because I don't know why I'm like I can get along with all women, but that's not true, right? But I feel like in our work environment, I feel that way, that we've created with Shift at least. But I think in moments of conflict, I think it's kind of what we talked about in our presentation of like challenging ourselves to show up in our truth and like honesty and care, like those can coexist. And it's not always like super clean cut, it can be messy, but I think, yeah, that's what I'll say about that. I don't know, Nat, do you have something to add?
Yeah, that's an interesting one because I think I asked if I'm not getting along with another woman in the organization, and that's a luxury we have that like we've cultivated relationships, but I also think that's taken work to work to the honesty. But if I'm sitting with someone and I'm not really getting along with them, I need to sit with why am I not getting along with them? Am I judging them? And what have I internalized? Do I have internalized inferiority? Do I have internalized superiority to this person? What is that tension? And it goes back to naming like all the internalized racism we've internalized and also externalized as well. Do I feel a threat? And that's also a problem too. Like, why do we feel threats if another woman of color is in this space as well? So if that is happening, I feel like folks need to examine what is really at play here. And then I do think I draw back into the honesty component and like examining why those tensions are coming up, what is really coming up for me, being honest and sitting with that honesty, and then having that honest conversations with those individuals. But I think there's some reflection on like, what is that tension and why are we rubbing up on one another as well?
I feel like you're naming shadow work, Nat, which I really appreciate, like working with individuals' shadows. I don't remember if I heard this in therapy or in a conversation or in the show, but I remember hearing a while ago, like oftentimes when you don't like something about a person, it's highlighting something within yourself. And what you're naming about like asking the why, I think when I feel like I'm speaking from my higher self, I can engage in that conversation of like, yeah, like what about this person is bringing up something for me,
right,
about me, and the why, like why, what is it? Is white supremacy? Is it my lived experience? Is it this person
my jealousy?
Right, like all
yeah. And I'm also sitting with, I think we've heard this growing up too, when some women are kind of like, I don't hang out with other women.
Ooh, I was briefly that girl.
And so it's like, why? What do you think about women? What is your experiences with women? Right? Like what are the ways we've been conditioned to be like in those ways? So yeah, just the inherent competition that happens, I feel like the competitiveness which we know there's so much more. We are not fighting for the piece of the pie. There's so much more to it. So there's also sitting with that as well.
And I want to name as a direct symptom of the system of patriarchy.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not ours. It is not creating new ways, y'all. New ways.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question from someone who is kind of just, dipping their toes into learning about women's history and what all this means and engaging in these conversations. So what advice would you have for someone like that who's trying to gain confidence in, using these practices both in their career and in their lives?
I'm still gaining confidence too. I'm still very much getting, and we're in it, and it affects decisions and people's livelihoods. And so I resonate with that question because I'm still seeking it too.
I mean, likewise, I think it's a daily,
You just show up and do it.
yeah. And I think just like when I hear that question, I just am like, exhale, like I feel like be gentle with yourself, be tender with yourself, be like present to the learning and the journey of like Nat and I are sharing this in the ways that we're sharing it now, but not because we're necessarily experts at this, not because we're necessarily like doing this super well every day. It's really like ongoing, as we've said, studentship, and like and we should recognize and celebrate the growth that we have had since we started Shift in 2017, and the ways that we've navigated, conversations and clients and things like that. It's so different than now. So I guess be kind to yourself, be tender with yourself, and also be present to the journey.
Yeah. One thing I'll quickly add, because I think I'm navigating that in real time, to self-confidence. If someone makes me doubt my decision, like a client makes me doubt my decision, it makes me second guess myself, I have to check in with myself and be like, I made that move because I knew that that was what I would have done in this situation, right? Yes, yes. And so then it just helped me when I checked in with my gut, knowing that regardless of how they were going to react to that, that was still the right decision Natalie would have done in that moment. Then that's all that matters. Like if I can feel good to that decision and know why I made that decision, then I can move in confidence, and it will shake a bit if someone doesn't react well to why I made that decision, but I know why I made that decision and I can feel good about it.
Coming back to your truth.
Yeah, coming back to the truth.
All right, I know we are running short of time. If we could ask one more
Yeah.
question before we go, and thank you all for submitting questions. This has been fantastic. We work in a community college. We're working with these young students that are about to navigate this culture that you've been talking about. So what is one piece of advice you'd give our WSE students who are about to graduate and want to get hired in this white-centered workforce while also trying to remain true to themselves?
Oh. I think I'll keep it. I think we've said this in a lot of iterations already, so I'll try to keep my short sweet. I think you learn the more you do it, and you learn the more about who you want to be. And so I think all I can say is that once you do it, then you'll be forced to make decisions about how you want to show up. And I think that's the only way I've been able to see what feels true to me. And I only will know that when I cross that bridge. So sending a lot of, I'm still figuring out how to be more sure of myself in these spaces. And so sending a lot of faith, but just the gutsiness to just take that first step into it.
I think I'll name, don't be afraid to fumble.
Yeah.
We're always fumbling all the time. And I would add, don't be afraid to fumble. And in turn, remember that you have everything that you already need for exactly where you are.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Thank you both. This was amazing. This gave us a ton of things to think about, both as women of color, but also allies. So I just want to thank you for presenting today and for giving us so many great points, so many good things to think about. And again, it's just so affirming to watch the two of you together. I mean, I think that's a testament and an example for all of us as well of just how we can support one another in the workplace. So really want to thank you for coming today. If everybody, you can give us our presenters a virtual round of applause. Thank you so much again for joining us. This was a great kickoff to Women's History Month. So we thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you all so much for who hosted us. I saw all the affirmations just through your visual screens and faces. Emily, thank you so much for moderating. That was so beautiful and so wonderful, and holding all the questions. And again, just so grateful to be here with you all today. We wish you all the best of your luck in your journey, and as we continue day by day in this wild world. So sending lots of love and peace to everyone's way.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Lots of love. And thank you, Terry, our interpreter.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Terry. Gosh, we talked so fast. I'm so sorry, Terry. It was lovely meeting everyone here. We'll hopefully see you all soon.
Take care. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of the day.